Brought to you by Penguin.
The Convenient Marriage by Georgette Heyer. Read by Avita Jay. Chapter 1. Lady Winwood being denied, the morning caller inquired with some anxiety for Miss Winwood, or, in fact, for any of the young ladies. In face of the rumour which had come to her ears, it would be too provoking if all the Winwood ladies were to withhold themselves. But the porter held the door fully open and said that Miss Winwood was at home. Directing the coachman of her extremely smart town carriage to wait for her, Mrs. Malfrey stepped into the dim hall and said briskly, "Where is Miss Winwood? You need not be at the trouble of announcing me." All the young ladies, it seemed, were in the small saloon. Mrs. Malfrey nodded and walked across the hall with a click of her high heels. As she ascended the stairs, her armazine skirts, spread over very large panier coude, brushed the banisters on either side of her. She reflected, not for the first time, that the stairway was too narrow, and the carpet positively shabby. She would be ashamed for her part of such old-fashioned furnishings, but although she claimed cousinship, she was not, she admitted to herself, a Winwood of Winwood. The small saloon, by which name the porter designated a back sitting-room, given over to the use of the young ladies, lay up one pair of stairs, and was well known to Mrs. Malfrey. She tapped with her gloved hand on one of the panels of the door, and entered on the echo of her knock. The three Misses Winwood were grouped by the window, presenting an artless and agreeable picture. Upon a faded yellow satin sofa sat Miss Winwood and Miss Charlotte, their arms entwined about each other's waists. They were much alike, but Miss Winwood was held to be the greater beauty. Her classic profile was turned to the door, but upon Mrs. Malfrey's rustling entrance she looked round and displayed to the visitor a pair of melting blue eyes and a sweet, arched mouth that formed at the moment an O of mild surprise. A quantity of fair curls dressed without powder and threaded by a blue riband framed her face and tumbled onto her shoulders in several ordered locks. Miss Charlotte was not seen to advantage beside the beauty of the family, but she was a true Winwood, with the famous straight nose and the same blue eyes. Her curls, not quite so fair as her sisters', owed their existence to hot irons. Her eyes were of a shallower blue, and her colouring inclined towards the sallow. But she was allowed to be a very well-looking young lady. Miss Horatia, the youngest of the three, had nothing that declared her lineage except her nose. Her hair was dark, her eyes a profound grey, and her brows, nearly black and rather thick, were quite straight, and gave her a serious, almost frowning expression. No amount of careful training would induce an arch in them. She was quite half a head shorter than her sisters, and at the age of 17 was obliged regretfully to admit that she was not likely to grow any taller. When Mrs. Malfrey came into the room, Horatia was seated on a low stool by the sofa, propping her chin in her hands and scowling dreadfully. Or perhaps, thought Mrs. Malfrey, that was just a trick of those preposterous eyebrows. All three sisters wore morning toilets of worked muslin over slight hoops, with Tiffany sashes round their waists. Countrified, thought Mrs. Malfrey, giving her fringed silk mantle a satisfied twitch. "My dears," she exclaimed, "I came the instant I heard. Tell me at once, is it true? Has Rule offered?" Miss Winwood, who had risen gracefully to receive her cousin, seemed to droop and to grow pale. "Yes," she said faintly. "Alas, it is quite true, Teresa." Mrs. Malfrey's eyes grew round with respect. "Oh, Lizzie," she breathed. "Rule, a countess, 20,000 a year?"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?